I should have trusted my gut that Thursday afternoon when Marcus called. There was something off in his voice, a tremor I'd never heard before in all our 12 years of friendship. But I was desperate for a weekend away from my cramped studio apartment and the suffocating weight of my failing relationship with Sarah, so I ignored the warning bells clanging in the back of my mind. "Hey, Danny," Marcus had said, his words coming out rushed and uneven. "I need a huge favor. Can you house sit for me this weekend? I know it's last minute, but something came up with my mom in Denver and I have to leave tonight." I remember shifting the phone to my other ear, already mentally packing a bag. "Yeah, man, of course, everything okay with your mom?" There was a pause, too long, the kind of silence that feels heavy, pregnant with unspoken words. She'll be fine, it's just, look, there are some things about the house I should probably tell you." Another pause. "Actually, never mind, it's nothing, just normal house stuff. Feed Rex twice a day, don't let him out after dark, and there's plenty of food in the fridge. I'll text you the alarm code." "Marcus, what aren't you telling me?" "Nothing, I swear, I'm just stressed about my mom, you know how I get." He laughed, but it sounded forced, artificial. "Thanks for doing this, Danny, really, I owe you big time." That was Wednesday. By Friday evening, I was pulling my beat-up Honda Civic into the long gravel driveway of Marcus's inherited family home, a sprawling Victorian-era house that sat like a brooding sentinel at the end of Blackwood Lane, surrounded by dense woods on three sides. The house had belonged to his grandmother, who'd passed away 6 months earlier, leaving it to Marcus in her will. I'd only been there once before, briefly, when Marcus first got the keys. We'd walked through the main floor and I remembered thinking it was beautiful in that old, ornate way, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, intricate crown molding. But there was something else too, something I couldn't quite name. The house felt aware, like it was watching us, measuring us, deciding whether we belonged. Now, as the autumn sun dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn, that feeling intensified. The house loomed before me, 3 stories of weathered gray siding and dark windows that reflected the dying light like dead eyes. A widow's walk crowned the roof, its wrought iron railing twisted and corroded by time. I grabbed my duffel bag from the backseat and made my way to the front porch. The wooden steps creaked under my weight and I noticed several of them were rotting, splitting down the middle. Marcus had mentioned wanting to fix the place up, but I guess he hadn't gotten around to it yet. The key was where he said it would be, under the third flower pot from the left, which held nothing but dry soil and the brittle remains of some long-dead plant. I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, not unpleasant exactly, but distinct: old wood, dust, and something else. Something vaguely sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase. The entryway stretched before me, the black and white checkered floor extending to a grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. To my left was the living room, to my right, a formal dining room I could barely see in the gathering gloom. "Hello," I called out, feeling foolish even as I did it. "Rex." A bark answered me from somewhere deeper in the house, followed by the scrabbling of claws on hardwood. A moment later, Marcus's German shepherd came bounding around the corner, tail wagging, tongue lolling. At least someone was happy to see me. "Hey, buddy," I said, kneeling down to scratch behind his ears. Rex was a good dog, well-trained and friendly, but as I petted him I noticed he kept glancing toward the stairs, his ears twitching. "What is it, boy?" He whined softly, then looked back at me, then back at the stairs. "Nothing up there but empty rooms," I told him, trying to convince myself as much as the dog. I found the light switches and began flipping them on, chasing away the shadows that had gathered in corners and doorways. The house came alive with warm, yellow light, and I felt some of my unease dissipate. It was just an old house, just wood and nails and plaster, nothing to be afraid of. I spent the next hour familiarizing myself with the layout. The first floor was larger than I remembered: living room, dining room, kitchen, a library that smelled of leather and pipe tobacco, a sunroom with windows on 3 sides, and a half-bath tucked under the stairs. The kitchen was surprisingly modern, clearly renovated sometime in the last decade, though the appliances looked worn. I fed Rex, found a beer in the fridge, and made myself a sandwich. Marcus had left detailed notes on the counter: feeding schedule for Rex, trash day, how to work the temperamental furnace in the basement, emergency numbers. At the bottom he'd scrawled, "Thanks again, Danny, make yourself at home, there's whiskey in the library if you need it. M." That last line struck me as odd. Why would I need whiskey? But I shrugged it off. Marcus knew I'd been going through a rough time, maybe he just thought I could use a drink. As night fell completely, I explored the second floor. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, all furnished with heavy antique furniture that probably dated back to when the house was built. Marcus had told me to use the master bedroom at the end of the hall, his grandmother's old room. The bed was made with fresh sheets and someone, probably Marcus, had cleared space in the closet and dresser for my things. I unpacked my bag, changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and was about to head back downstairs when I noticed the door at the opposite end of the hallway. It was different from the others, darker wood with an old-fashioned keyhole and what looked like hand-forged hinges. I walked over and tried the handle. Locked. I frowned. Marcus hadn't mentioned a locked room. I pulled out my phone and started to text him, then stopped. His mom was sick. He didn't need me bothering him about a locked door. It was probably just storage or maybe a room that wasn't safe, rotted floorboards or something. I headed back downstairs, Rex trailing behind me. We settled in the living room and I flipped through channels until I found a basketball game. Rex curled up on the rug by my feet, and for a while everything felt normal, just a quiet Friday night in an old house. But around 10 o'clock things started to change. It began with Rex. He suddenly lifted his head, ears perked, staring at the doorway that led to the entrance hall. His body went rigid and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" I muted the TV and listened. At first I heard nothing, then so faint I almost missed it, a creak from upstairs. Old houses settle, I told myself, especially at night when the temperature drops, but Rex didn't relax. If anything, he became more tense, his growl intensifying. Then I heard it again, another creak and another, a rhythmic sound like footsteps moving slowly across the second floor. My heart began to pound. "Hello," I called out, hiding the tremor in my voice. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Rex barked once, sharp and loud, then bolted from the room. I heard him running up the stairs, his claws clicking rapidly on the hardwood. I jumped up and followed, flipping on lights as I went. "Rex, come here." I found him on the second floor landing, standing in front of that locked door, barking furiously. His hackles were raised and he was showing his teeth, something I'd never seen him do before. "Rex, heel," I commanded, using the firm voice Marcus had taught me. The dog ignored me completely, continuing to bark at the door. I approached slowly, my skin prickling with goosebumps despite the warmth of the house. As I got closer, I could have sworn I felt something, a coldness emanating from the door, like standing in front of an open freezer. Then from the other side of the door, I heard it. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. From inside the locked room. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over Rex. My rational mind scrambled for explanations, pipes, settling wood, and animal in the walls, but none of them fit. Those knocks had been too clear, too intentional. "Who's there?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. Another knock, then another, and another. Knock, knock, knock. Rex's barking reached a fever pitch. I grabbed his collar and pulled him away from the door, dragging him toward the stairs. He resisted at first, then suddenly went quiet and followed me, pressing against my leg as we retreated to the first floor. Back in the living room, I tried to calm my racing heart. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I called Marcus. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again, same result. I sent a text, "Marcus, call me when you get this. Something weird is happening at the house." I waited, staring at my phone. 5 minutes passed, 10, no response. I considered leaving, just getting in my car and finding a hotel for the night. But what would I tell Marcus? That I'd heard some noises and run away like a scared child? He'd trusted me to watch his house, his dog. I couldn't just abandon that responsibility because of some creaky floorboards and my overactive imagination. I went to the library and found the whiskey Marcus had mentioned, a bottle of Jameson, half empty. I poured myself a generous glass and drank it too fast, feeling the burn spread through my chest. It helped a little, enough that I could think more clearly. Old houses make noise, that was a fact. The locked room probably had drafts, air pressure changes, any number of things that could cause those sounds, and I'd been stressed lately, not sleeping well. My mind was playing tricks on me. I poured another whiskey and brought it back to the living room. Rex had calmed down and was lying on the rug again, though his ears still twitched at every sound. I turned the TV back on, found a comedy, and tried to focus on the jokes instead of the creaks and groans of the house settling around me. By midnight, I'd convinced myself I was being ridiculous. I finished my drink, let Rex out for a quick bathroom break, and headed upstairs to bed. The door at the end of the hall remained closed and silent. I avoided looking at it as I passed. In the master bedroom, I changed into my pajamas and climbed into bed. The mattress was old but comfortable, and I was exhausted from the week, from the emotional turmoil with Sarah, from the adrenaline spike earlier. I should have fallen asleep immediately. But I didn't. I lay there in the darkness, hyper-aware of every sound. The house seemed to breathe around me, sighs and whispers and creaks that formed no pattern I could predict. Rex had followed me upstairs and curled up on the floor beside the bed, which gave me some comfort. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke with a start to find the room flooded with pale moonlight. The curtains I'd closed before bed were now open, pulled back from the tall windows. My heart hammered as I sat up, trying to remember if I'd actually closed them or just thought about closing them. Then I noticed something else. The bedroom door, which I'd definitely closed, stood wide open. And in the hallway beyond, I could hear something. Not footsteps this time, but a sound that made my blood run cold. Humming. A woman's voice, soft and melodic, humming a tune I didn't recognize. It seemed to be coming from the direction of that locked room. Rex was awake too, sitting up, staring at the open doorway, but he wasn't barking or growling. He was listening, his head tilted as if the sound confused him rather than frightened him. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and moved to the doorway. The humming continued, unchanged by my movement. Now that I was closer, I could tell it was definitely coming from behind the locked door. Part of me wanted to run downstairs, grab my keys, and leave, but a stronger part, the part that had always been too curious for my own good, needed to know what was happening. I needed to understand. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the runner carpet. The humming grew louder as I approached. It was a lullaby, I realized, something old and melancholy, the kind of song a mother might sing to a restless child. I stood in front of the locked door, my hand hovering over the old brass knob. The metal was ice cold to the touch, so cold it almost burned. I tried to turn it, knowing it was locked but needing to try anyway. To my shock, it turned. The door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing a narrow staircase leading up into darkness. A staircase to the third floor, the attic, I assumed. The humming was coming from up there at the top of those stairs in the darkness I couldn't see into. And as I stood there, frozen, trying to decide what to do, the humming stopped. A voice called down to me from the darkness above. "Daniel, is that you, sweetheart? I've been waiting for you to come home." The voice was gentle, warm, loving. The voice of someone who knew me, who cared for me, but I'd never heard it before in my life. I stumbled backward and the door slammed shut with such force that the whole house seemed to shake. The lock clicked into place and I heard footsteps on the stairs beyond, not coming down but receding, climbing higher into the house. This time I did run. I spent the rest of that night in my car, parked at a 24-hour diner 10 miles away, drinking bad coffee and trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Rex sat in the passenger seat, occasionally whining and looking back in the direction of the house as if he wanted to return. "We're not going back," I told him firmly, "not until the sun comes up." But even as I said it, I knew I would go back. Whatever was happening in that house, I couldn't just walk away from it. Marcus had asked for my help, and beyond that I needed answers. Who or what had called my name? How had it known who I was? As dawn broke over the Pennsylvania hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I made my decision. I would go back to the house. I would search it top to bottom, and I would find a rational explanation for everything that had happened. The drive back felt longer than it had the night before. Every mile I questioned my sanity. But I kept going, Rex panting beside me, his tail wagging now that we were headed home. At least one of us was happy about it. The house looked different in the morning light, less menacing, more sad. The paint was peeling in places I hadn't noticed before, and several of the shutters hung at odd angles. It was just an old house in need of repair, nothing more. I let us in through the front door, half expecting something to jump out at me, but the house was silent and still. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Everything looked normal, mundane, completely unthreatening. "See," I said to Rex, "nothing to worry about." I fed him and made myself breakfast, moving through the kitchen with forced casualness, trying to act like everything was fine. But my eyes kept drifting to the ceiling, to the floor above, to that locked door I knew waited at the end of the hallway. After I'd eaten and had 2 more cups of coffee, I steeled my nerves and headed upstairs. In the full light of day, the second-floor hallway looked perfectly ordinary. The runner carpet was a bit worn, the wallpaper faded, but there was nothing sinister about it. I walked to the door at the end of the hall. In the daylight, I could see it more clearly. The dark wood was walnut, hand-carved with an intricate floral pattern. The keyhole was large and old-fashioned, the kind you could actually look through. I bent down and peered through it. The staircase beyond was dim but visible, leading up to what must be the third floor. I couldn't see much else, just dark wood and shadows. I tried the knob again, still locked. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus again. This time, it rang 3 times before going to voicemail. "Marcus, it's Danny. I really need you to call me back. There's a locked door up here and I heard. Look, just call me, okay? I need to know what's on the third floor." I hung up and stared at the door for a long moment. Then I made another decision that would change everything. I was going to find the key. I spent the next 2 hours searching the house. I started in the obvious places: kitchen drawers, the desk in the library, the dresser in the master bedroom. Nothing. I found dozens of keys, but none that fit that old-fashioned lock. In the library, I discovered a metal filing cabinet tucked in the corner behind a leather armchair. It was locked, but the lock was flimsy, and I managed to jimmy it open with a letter opener from the desk. Inside were files, old documents, tax records, medical bills, all belonging to Marcus's grandmother, Evelyn Thorne. I felt guilty rifling through a dead woman's papers, but I kept going. In the bottom drawer, I found a leather-bound journal, the kind with a lock, though the lock had been broken long ago. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the handwriting spidery and difficult to read. I flipped through it carefully. It appeared to be some kind of diary or record book dating back to the 1950s. Most of the entries were mundane, whether observations, gardening notes, social engagements. But as I got further into the journal, the entries changed. October 15, 1962, she's getting stronger. I can feel her presence even during the day now. Margaret says I should leave, that the house isn't safe, but where would I go? This is my home. I won't be driven out. November 3, 1962, found all the doors open again this morning, even the door to the third floor. I keep it locked for a reason. She knows this. Why does she insist on defying me? December 21, 1962, the humming has started again, that same lullaby over and over. I haven't heard it in years. I thought perhaps she'd finally moved on, but I was wrong. She'll never leave, not until she gets what she wants. The entries ended abruptly after that. The rest of the pages were blank. I sat back in the chair, my mind racing. Who was she? What did she want? And why had Marcus never mentioned any of this? I kept searching more frantically now. In the dining room, I found a china cabinet filled with dusty dishes and crystal glasses. On the top shelf, pushed to the back, was a wooden box. I pulled it down and opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, black and white, yellowed with age. I spread them out on the dining room table and began sorting through them. Most showed people I didn't recognize: stern-faced men in suits, women in long dresses, children in old-fashioned clothes. But one photograph stopped me cold. It showed a young woman, maybe 25 or 30, standing in front of this very house. She was beautiful in a delicate way, with dark hair pulled back from a pale face and large, sad eyes. She wore a white dress and held a baby in her arms. On the back of the photograph, in faded ink, someone had written, "Abigail and Daniel, 1945. Daniel, my name. My hands started shaking. It had to be a coincidence. Daniel was a common name, but the voice last night had called me Daniel, not Danny, and it had said, "I've been waiting for you to come home." I grabbed another photograph. This one showed the same woman, older now, maybe in her 40s. She stood at the bottom of a staircase, the staircase, I realized with a jolt, the one that led to the third floor. Her expression was harder to read in this picture, sad maybe, or resigned. On the back, Abigail, 1963, last photograph. I shuffled through more photos, finding several more of Abigail at different ages. In the earliest ones, she looked happy. In the later ones, that happiness had faded, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. Sorrow, madness, both. And then I found the photograph that made everything click into place. It showed a family portrait, a man, a woman, and 3 children. The adults sat stiffly in chairs while the children stood behind them. The woman was Evelyn, Marcus's grandmother, though much younger than I'd ever seen her. The man must have been her husband. But it was one of the children that caught my attention. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, with dark hair and a serious expression. On the back of the photograph, the Thorne family, 1952, Richard, Evelyn, Margaret, Thomas, and Abigail. Abigail wasn't holding the baby in these photographs. She was the baby. Or rather, she'd been the baby, grown into a child, one of Evelyn's children. Marcus had never mentioned an aunt named Abigail. I pulled out my phone and did what I should have done hours ago. I Googled Abigail Thorne along with the address of the house. The results made my blood run cold. The first hit was a newspaper article from 1963, digitized and uploaded to a historical archive. The headline read, "Local woman found dead in tragic accident." I clicked on it and read. Abigail Thorne, 32, was found dead in her family home on Blackwood Lane yesterday evening. According to police, Miss Thorne fell down the stairs from the third-floor attic, breaking her neck. Her mother, Evelyn Thorne, discovered the body. Miss Thorne had lived in the family home her entire life and had recently been under the care of a physician for what family members described as nervous troubles. She is survived by her mother, Evelyn, her sister, Margaret, and her brother, Thomas. Her father, Richard Thorne, preceded her in death in 1958. I kept reading, finding more articles, piecing together the story. Abigail Thorne had been institutionalized twice in her life, once in her early 20s and again in her late 20s. The articles didn't specify why, using vague terms like melancholia and hysteria, the kind of diagnoses doctors threw around in those days when they didn't know what else to call a woman's suffering. She'd never married, never left the family home. According to one article I found, she'd given birth to a child out of wedlock in 1945, a son she'd named Daniel. The child had been taken from her and put up for adoption. She'd never seen him again. I sat back from my phone, my heart pounding. The woman who'd called to me last night, who'd known my name, she thought I was her son. She'd been waiting all these years for Daniel to come home. But I wasn't her Daniel. I was just someone who happened to have the same name, who happened to be staying in her house. Wasn't I? A horrible thought occurred to me. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. She answered on the third ring, sounding concerned. "Danny, what's wrong? It's not even noon." "Mom, I need to ask you something about my adoption." There was a long pause. My adoption wasn't something we talked about much. My parents had adopted me when I was 3 days old and they'd always been open about it, but the details were something we avoided. It was a closed adoption and my birth mother had wanted no contact. "What about it?" my mother asked carefully. "Do you know anything about my birth mother, anything at all?" "Danny, you know it was a closed adoption. We don't have any information about her. That's what she wanted." "But there must be something, records, paperwork, anything." "Why are you asking about this now?" I couldn't tell her the truth. I've been thinking about it lately. Please, Mom, if there's anything you know, anything at all, I need to hear it. Another pause, then, the only thing we were told was that she was young, unmarried, and that she died shortly after you were born. I'm sorry, honey, I know that's not what you wanted to hear. How did she die? They didn't tell us. Danny, what's going on? Why are you asking about this now? I have to go, Mom, I'll call you later. I hung up before she could ask more questions. My mind was reeling. My birth mother had died shortly after I was born. I'd been born in 1987. Abigail had died in 1963. The timeline didn't match. It couldn't be the same person. But then why had she known my name? Why had she been waiting for me? I needed to see the third floor. I needed to see what was behind that locked door. I went back to searching for the key with renewed urgency. I tore through the house, checking every drawer, every shelf, every hiding place I could think of. Nothing. Finally, in desperation, I went to the basement. I'd avoided it until now. Marcus's notes had said the furnace could be temperamental, but otherwise there was no reason to go down there. The basement stairs were narrow and steep, the kind that feel like they're going to give way under your feet. I flipped the light switch at the top but nothing happened. The bulb must have burned out. I used my phone's flashlight and descended carefully. The basement was unfinished, all concrete and exposed joists divided into several rooms. I found the furnace in the first room still chugging away. The second room held boxes of old Christmas decorations, camping gear, things accumulated over decades. The third room was different. It was smaller than the others, barely more than a closet, with a heavy wooden door that looked newer than anything else in the basement. The door had a padlock on it, but the padlock hung open. I pulled the door open and shined my light inside. The room was empty except for a single wooden chair in the center. The walls were covered in writing, the same phrase over and over in different hands, different inks, different decades. Daniel will come home, Daniel will come home, Daniel will come home. Hundreds of times, thousands, covering every inch of the walls, the ceiling, even the floor. I backed out of the room, my stomach churning. What kind of madness had consumed this family? What had happened in this house? Then I noticed something I'd missed, a small shelf on the wall just outside the door. On it sat a single key, old and ornate, the kind that would fit an antique lock. The key to the third floor. I grabbed it and ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. Rex barked at me as I passed through the kitchen, but I didn't stop. I had to see, I had to know. I reached the second-floor hallway and stopped in front of the walnut door. My hand shook as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly and I heard the bolt slide back with a soft click. I pushed the door open. The staircase beyond was dark even in the middle of the day. I could see the steps clearly enough. They were steep and narrow, made of dark wood that matched the door. But the light from the hallway seemed to stop at the threshold, as if something was absorbing it. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight again. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the stairs climbing up and curving to the left. I couldn't see the top. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the confined space. "Is anyone there?" No response, but I could feel something. A presence, a weight, a sense of being watched. I put my foot on the first step. The wood creaked under my weight but held firm. I took another step, then another, climbing slowly into the darkness. The temperature dropped as I ascended and I could see my breath fogging in the beam of my flashlight. The stairs curved and I found myself facing a landing and another door. This one wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped into the third floor. The attic was one large room, stretching the entire length and width of the house. The ceiling sloped down to meet the walls and small windows on either end let in dim light. The space was filled with furniture covered in white sheets, trunks and boxes stacked against the walls, and the accumulated detritus of generations. But that's not what drew my eye. In the center of the room was a bed, and in the bed, lying perfectly still under a white coverlet, was a woman. I should have run. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn around and get out of that house. But I couldn't move. I stood frozen in the doorway, my flashlight beam fixed on the figure in the bed. She looked exactly like the photographs, the same delicate features, the same dark hair, though it was now spread across the pillow like a dark halo. She wore a white nightgown and her hands were folded across her chest. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful. She looked like she was sleeping, except I knew she'd been dead for over 60 years. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself. "This isn't real." But as I said it, her eyes opened. They were dark eyes, deep and sad, and they looked directly at me. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Daniel," she said softly, "you came. I knew you would come." I stumbled backward and my phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. The flashlight beam went wild, sending shadows dancing across the walls and ceiling. When I scrambled to pick it up and pointed it at the bed again, she was sitting up. "Don't be afraid," she said. "I've waited so long to see you. Come closer, let me look at you." "You're not real," I managed to say. "You're dead. You died in 1963. She tilted her head, studying me with those sad, dark eyes. "Is that what they told you? I suppose in a way it's true. This body died a long time ago, but I never left, Daniel. I couldn't leave, not without you. I had to wait. I had to be here when you came home. I'm not your son, I'm not your Daniel." "Aren't you?" She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood up. She moved like she was real, solid, her bare feet making soft sounds on the wooden floor as she walked toward me. You have his name, you have his eyes, and you came to this house just as I always knew you would." I backed toward the stairs, but she was faster than she should have been. One moment she was across the room, the next she was standing right in front of me, so close I could have touched her. I could see every detail of her face, the fine lines around her eyes, the paleness of her skin. I could also see that she cast no shadow in my flashlight beam. "I've waited so long," she said again, reaching out a hand toward my face. "They took you from me when you were just 3 days old, did you know that? They said I was unfit, that I couldn't take care of a child, they said I was sick." Her expression hardened. "I wasn't sick, I was heartbroken, they didn't understand the difference." Her hand touched my cheek and it was cold, not freezing like the door handle had been, but cool like touching marble. I flinched but didn't pull away, something in her eyes held me there. "I searched for you," she continued. "For years, I wrote letters to every adoption agency in the state. I hired private detectives. I drove my family to distraction with my searching. But they'd hidden you too well. They'd changed your name, given you to a family far away, made sure I could never find you." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, and I was horrified to see that they looked real, wet, and warm. "It destroyed me," she whispered. "Not being able to find you, not knowing if you were safe, if you were happy, if anyone told you about me. I started to lose myself. The doctors gave me pills, but they didn't help. Nothing helped. Nothing except the thought that someday, somehow, I would see you again." "How did you die?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She stepped back and her expression shifted to something darker. "I didn't die, Daniel. I chose to stay. When my body wore out, when it couldn't continue anymore, I chose to remain here in this house. Because I knew that one day you would come home." "But I'm not." "You are," her voice rose, echoing through the attic. The lights in my phone flickered. "You have to be. I've waited too long, sacrificed too much. You have to be him." I finally found my courage and turned to run, but the door to the stairs slammed shut before I could reach it. I grabbed the handle and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. "Please," Abigail said behind me, her voice breaking. "Please don't leave me again. I can't bear it, not again." I turned to face her, pressing my back against the locked door. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite my terror, despite the impossibility of what was happening, I felt a deep, aching sympathy for this woman, this ghost, this spirit, whatever she was. "I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry they took your son, but I'm not him. I can't be who you need me to be." She stood there in the middle of the attic, her white nightgown billowing slightly though there was no breeze. The tears continued to stream down her face. "Then why did you come?" she asked. "Why did you come to this house, Daniel? Of all the people in the world, why you?" It was a good question, one I didn't have an answer for. "Marcus asked me to house sit," I said. "It's just a coincidence, just." "There are no coincidences," she interrupted. "Not here, not in this house. Everything that happens here happens for a reason." She moved closer again, and this time I had nowhere to retreat. "You came because you were meant to, because something in you recognized this place, recognized me." "That's not possible." "Isn't it?" She reached out and took my hand. Her touch was cold but gentle. "Tell me, Daniel, have you always felt like something was missing, like there was a piece of yourself you couldn't quite find?" I wanted to say no, to deny it completely, but I couldn't because she was right. I had always felt that way, disconnected, incomplete, like I was searching for something I couldn't name. That's normal," I stammered. "Everyone feels like that sometimes." "Do they?" She pulled me toward the center of the room, toward the bed. "Or is it that you've always known, deep down, that you didn't belong where you were, that your real home was somewhere else?" We reached the bed and she sat down on the edge, still holding my hand. She looked up at me with those impossibly sad eyes. "I'm going to tell you a story, Daniel, and when I'm done, you'll understand why you're here." I should have refused, I should have fought harder to escape, but part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, needed to hear what she had to say. She gestured to the space beside her on the bed. "Sit with me, please." Against my better judgment, I sat. The mattress was old and soft and I sank down into it. Abigail didn't let go of my hand. "I was 19 when I met your father," she began, her voice taking on a distant quality as if she was looking back through decades of time. "His name was James. He was a soldier stationed at the base about 50 miles from here. He came into town one weekend and we met at a dance. It was 1944. The war was still raging in Europe and the Pacific, and everyone knew he'd be shipping out soon." She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. He was handsome, charming, he made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. We spent every moment we could together over the next 3 weeks, and then he was gone, sent overseas. He promised he'd write, promised he'd come back for me, and I believed him. Her smile faded. He did write for a while, sweet letters full of promises, but then the letters stopped coming, and 3 months after he left I realized I was pregnant. I listened, transfixed despite myself. My father was furious, she continued. My mother was devastated. They called me terrible names, said I'd brought shame on the family. They wanted me to get rid of the baby, but I couldn't, I wouldn't. That baby was all I had left of James, and I was going to protect him no matter what. She squeezed my hand. They sent me away to a home for unwed mothers. I lived there for 6 months, waiting for you to be born, and when you finally came, her voice broke. You were perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair. You had his eyes, James's eyes, dark and deep and beautiful. Tears were streaming down her face again. They let me hold you for 3 days. 3 days, Daniel, that's all I got. I fed you, changed you, sang to you. I memorized every inch of your face. And then they came and took you away. I screamed, she said, her voice barely a whisper now. I fought them. I begged them to let me keep you, but my father had signed the papers. He'd arranged everything. You were adopted before you were even a week old, and they wouldn't tell me who took you or where you went. She looked at me, her eyes burning with an intensity that made me want to look away. Do you understand what that did to me, having my child ripped from my arms, knowing he was out there somewhere growing up without me and I couldn't do anything about it? I'm sorry, I said again, because what else could I say? I came back to this house, she continued, back to my childhood home, and I tried to move on, tried to build a life, but I couldn't. Every child I saw, I wondered if it was you, every dark-haired boy, every toddler, every teenager. Could that be my Daniel? The wondering drove me mad. Literally, I started seeing you everywhere. I'd follow strangers on the street, convinced they were you. I'd show up at schools, playgrounds, anywhere children might be. My family thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. She stood up and walked to one of the small windows, looking out at the afternoon sun filtering through the trees. They had me committed the first time when I was 23. I'd tried to take a child from a grocery store, convinced he was you. The police were called. My mother had me institutionalized rather than prosecuted. I was there for 2 years. When I came out, I tried to be better. I tried to accept that I'd never see you again, but the pain never went away. It grew, festered, consumed me from the inside out. She turned back to me. I was committed again when I was 28. This time I'd broken into a stranger's house trying to get to their son. I was convinced, absolutely convinced, that they'd stolen you from me. It took 3 police officers to pull me away. After that, they wouldn't let me leave the house. My mother kept me here on the 3rd floor away from everyone. She said it was for my own good to protect me, but really it was to protect the family from the embarrassment I'd become. She gestured around the attic. This became my world, this room, this floor, this house. Mother brought me meals, gave me my medicine, made sure I was comfortable. But I was a prisoner in my own family's home. I spent years up here, she said. Years staring out those windows, years writing your name on every surface I could find, years imagining the day you'd come home to me. Mother thought I was delusional. She thought I was stuck in the past, unable to accept reality. But I wasn't delusional, Daniel. I was waiting, because I knew that somehow, someday you would find your way back to me. How did you die? I asked again. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. I told you I didn't die, not exactly. One night in 1963, I was standing at the top of the stairs. I'd been thinking about you, as I always did, wondering where you were, if you were happy, if you ever thought about me. And I realized something. As long as I was alive, trapped in this body, I could never find you. The world was too big and I was too confined. But if I let go of this physical form, if I released myself from the limitations of flesh and bone, I could wait here forever. I could reach out into the world, searching for you, calling to you. My blood ran cold. You're saying you killed yourself. I'm saying I chose to transform, she corrected. I stood at the top of those stairs and I stepped off. My body fell, my neck broke, and I died. But I didn't leave. I couldn't leave. I bound myself to this house, to this place, so that when you finally came home, I'd be here waiting. That's insane, I said, standing up. That's completely insane. Is it? She moved toward me again, gliding across the floor. Look at yourself, Daniel, look at where you are. You came to this house. You heard me calling. You found the photographs, read the journal, discovered the truth, and now you're here with me just as I always knew you would be. Because Marcus asked me to house sit. And why do you think Marcus inherited this house? She asked. Why do you think it came to him and not to his mother or his aunt? Why do you think he felt compelled to ask you of all people to come here? I shook my head. You're not making any sense. Marcus is my nephew, she said. His mother was my sister, Margaret. When our mother died, she left this house to him because she knew what I'd been waiting for all these years. She knew that one day someone would come, someone who would help me find peace. And Marcus, I asked, does he know about you? He knows the house is haunted, she said. He's felt my presence, heard me moving through the rooms. That's why he's never spent more than a few nights here. That's why he was so eager to have someone else stay. He thought if someone else was here, I might leave him alone. But he sent me specifically, I said, understanding dawning. He knew my name was Daniel. Yes, she said softly, though I don't think he understood why that mattered. He doesn't know the full story. Margaret never told her children everything. She was ashamed of me, of what I became. I backed toward the door again, my mind reeling. I need to leave, I need to get out of this house. You can leave, Abigail said. I won't stop you, but before you go, I need you to understand something. I need you to know why this matters. I already know why it matters to you, I said. You lost your son and you've spent decades waiting for him to come back, but I'm not him, I can't be him. Can't you? She moved closer, her form seeming to flicker slightly in the dim light. What do you know about your birth mother, Daniel? What did your parents tell you? That she died shortly after I was born, I said. That it was a closed adoption, that she wanted no contact. And you believed that? Why wouldn't I? Because parents lie, she said. They lie to protect their children, to make their stories simpler, easier to accept. But what if the truth was more complicated? What if your birth mother didn't die? What if she's been here all along, waiting? You died in 1963, I said firmly. I was born in 1987, the math doesn't work. Doesn't it? She tilted her head, studying me. Time works differently for me now. Past, present, future, they all blend together. I can see moments that haven't happened yet, remember things that are still to come. That's impossible. So is a woman who's been dead for 60 years talking to you in an attic, she pointed out. And yet, here we are. She had a point. What do you want from me? I asked, exhausted. What do you need? Her expression softened. I need to know that my son is safe, that he's happy, that his life turned out well despite everything I couldn't give him. I need to know that my sacrifice, binding myself to this house, waiting all these years, wasn't for nothing. But I'm not. Tell me about your life, she interrupted. Please, tell me about the people who raised you. Tell me if they were kind. Tell me if you were loved. I didn't know what else to do, so I told her. I told her about my parents, adoptive parents, though I'd never thought of them that way, who had loved me unconditionally. About my childhood in a small town in Ohio, about Little League and birthday parties and family vacations. About how they'd always been honest with me about being adopted, but how it had never mattered because they were my real parents in every way that counted. Abigail listened, tears streaming down her face, nodding occasionally. I told her about school, about the friends I'd made and lost over the years. About discovering my love for writing, about the teachers who'd encouraged me, about my struggles and triumphs, my hopes and fears. And as I talked, something strange happened. The attic seemed to brighten, the shadows receding. Abigail's form became more solid, more real, but also somehow more translucent, as if she was becoming both more and less substantial at the same time. They sound wonderful, she said when I finally stopped talking. Your parents, I'm glad they loved you well. They did, I said, they still do. And this Sarah you mentioned, you love her. I thought about Sarah. About our fights and our reconciliations, about the way she made me laugh even when I wanted to stay angry. Yes, I said, I do, but I don't know if it's going to work out. Why not? Because I'm broken, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Because there's always been this hole in me. This feeling that something's missing, that I'm not quite complete, and I don't know how to fix it. Abigail nodded, understanding in her eyes. That's what I felt too, that hole, that incompleteness. I thought it was because I'd lost you, but maybe, she paused, considering, Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just the human condition feeling like we're not quite whole, searching for something to fill that empty space. Then how do we fix it? We don't, she said. We learn to live with it. We find people who understand, who accept us as we are, holes and all. We build lives that matter even if they're not perfect. She walked back to the bed and sat down. I spent so many years obsessed with what I'd lost that I forgot to live. I forgot that life goes on, that there's beauty and joy even in the midst of pain. I bound myself to this house, to this endless waiting, and I missed everything. It's not too late, I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. Isn't it? She smiled sadly. I've been dead for 60 years, Daniel. I think it's probably too late for me. Then why am I here? If I'm not your son, if you know that now, why did I need to come? She looked at me for a long moment. Because I needed to let go, I needed to tell my story to someone who would listen, who would understand. I needed to know that my Daniel, wherever he is, whatever happened to him, I needed to believe he had a good life, that he was loved. And now you know. Now I know, she said. Because even if you're not my Daniel, you could have been. You're proof that adopted children can be happy, can be loved, can build beautiful lives, and that's enough. It has to be enough. The attic was definitely getting brighter now, sunlight streaming in through the windows with an intensity that seemed impossible. Abigail's form was fading, becoming more and more transparent. What's happening? I asked. I'm leaving, she said simply. I'm finally letting go. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Wait, I said, taking a step toward her. I don't understand. If I'm not your son, then who am I? Why does my name matter? Why did I feel drawn to this house? She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. Maybe you are my Daniel in a way, maybe not the one I gave birth to, but the one I needed to meet, or maybe it's just coincidence like you said. Does it really matter? I think it does. Then here's what I believe, she said, her voice growing fainter as her form faded. I believe that we're all connected, all part of the same web of lives and stories and moments. I believe my Daniel is out there somewhere living his life, and maybe he sometimes feels that empty space too, wondering about the mother who gave him up. And I believe you came here because you needed to understand that those holes we carry, they don't have to define us. They can make us more compassionate, more understanding, more human. She was almost completely transparent now, just a shimmer in the sunlight. Go back to Sarah, Daniel, tell her about the holes you carry, let her love you anyway, build a life that matters. And when you think of me, don't think of the woman who went mad with grief. Think of the 19-year-old girl who fell in love at a dance. Think of the mother who held her baby for 3 days and loved him enough to let him go. I will, I promised. And one more thing, she said, her voice now barely a whisper. Tell Marcus he can have his house back, tell him I'm gone, tell him I'm finally at peace. And then she was gone. The light faded to normal afternoon sun. The attic was just an attic again, dusty and cluttered and empty. I stood there for a long time trying to process what had happened. Had it been real? Had I really just spent the last hour talking to a ghost? Or had I had some kind of breakdown, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too little sleep and too much emotional turmoil? I didn't know, I wasn't sure I ever would. But I did know one thing, I felt different, lighter, like something that had been weighing me down for years had finally been lifted. I made my way down the stairs, through the house, and out into the fading afternoon. Rex was waiting for me in the kitchen, tail wagging. I fed him, then called Marcus. This time he answered on the first ring. Danny, God, I'm so sorry I haven't called back. Things here have been crazy. My mom's doing better though. How's everything at the house? I considered what to tell him. The truth, that I'd spent the day talking to his dead aunt's ghost, that she'd been haunting the house for 60 years waiting for her lost son. It's fine, I said instead. Everything's fine, but Marcus, I need to tell you something about the house. What is it? I think whatever was here before is gone now. I think the house is just a house again. There was a long pause. What do you mean, whatever was here before? You know what I mean, the presence you felt, the sounds you heard, the reason you could never spend more than a few nights here. She's gone now, she's at peace. Another pause. How do you know? I just do, trust me. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, if you say so. We talked for a few more minutes about practical matters, when he'd be back, where the spare key was if I needed to leave before he returned. But my mind was elsewhere, already thinking about what came next. I stayed at the house that night, but I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. No sounds, no whispers, no footsteps in the dark, just the normal creaks and sighs of an old house settling into sleep. In the morning, I packed my things and got ready to leave, but before I did, I had one more thing to do. I went back up to the third floor to that attic room where I'd spoken with Abigail. In the daylight, it looked different, smaller, sadder, like a cage where someone had been kept prisoner for far too long. I spent the next few hours cleaning it out. I took down the white sheets covering the furniture, revealing antique pieces that were beautiful beneath the dust. I opened the windows, letting in fresh air for what might have been the first time in decades. I organized the boxes and trunks, making the space feel less like a prison and more like what it should have been, just an attic, full of memories and forgotten things. And when I was done, I stood in the center of the room and said a prayer. I wasn't religious, hadn't been to church since I was a kid, but it felt right. A prayer for Abigail, for her lost son, for all the broken hearts and shattered dreams that had filled this house over the years. Then I locked the door behind me, not because I was afraid, but because some doors should stay closed, some stories should be allowed to end. Before I left town, I made one more stop. I went to the local library and asked to see their historical records. The librarian, an elderly woman who'd probably worked there for decades, helped me find what I was looking for. Birth records from 1945. I scrolled through them until I found it. Daniel James Morrison, born March 15, 1945, to Abigail Thorne and James Morrison, father, deceased. So there had been a Daniel. Abigail's story was true, at least the parts I could verify. I did some more digging, searching through adoption records that had been unsealed over the years. It took me hours, but I finally found a trail. Daniel James Morrison had been adopted by a family named Peterson. They'd moved to California shortly after the adoption. From there, the trail went cold. I couldn't find any records of what happened to Daniel Peterson after childhood. He could be anywhere, could be anyone, he could even be dead. But somewhere out there, I believed, was a man in his late 70s who'd been born in this small Pennsylvania town to a young woman who'd loved him enough to let him go. A man who might carry that same empty space I did, that same sense of something missing. I hoped he'd had a good life. For Abigail's sake, I hoped he'd been happy. The drive back to my apartment took 3 hours. 3 hours to think about everything that had happened, everything I'd learned, everything that had changed. When I got home, Sarah was waiting on my doorstep. She looked tired, her eyes red like she'd been crying. When she saw me, she stood up quickly. "Danny, I love you," I said, cutting her off. "I love you, and I'm sorry I've been so difficult to be with. I'm sorry I push you away. I'm sorry I can't always explain the things I feel or the way I act." She stared at me, surprised. "What brought this on?" "I spent the weekend in a haunted house," I said, then laughed at the absurdity of it. "And I learned something. I learned that the empty spaces we carry, they don't have to destroy us. They can make us better if we let them, if we share them with people who care." I took her hands in mine. "I have these holes in me, Sarah, these places where I feel incomplete, where I feel like something's missing. I probably always will, but I don't want them to keep us apart. I want to share them with you. I want to let you love me anyway." Tears streamed down her face. "You idiot, I already do love you anyway, I always have." "I know," I said, "but I think I needed to learn how to let you." We went inside and I told her everything. About Marcus's house, about the photographs and the journal, about the voice in the night and the woman in the attic, about Abigail and her lost son, about grief and madness and the power of letting go. She listened without interrupting, her hand in mine, and when I was done, she didn't tell me I was crazy. She didn't suggest I'd imagined it all or that I needed therapy, though I probably did. She just pulled me close and said, "I'm glad you're home." 3 months later, on a cold January morning, I received a letter. The envelope was yellowed with age, the handwriting spidery and old-fashioned. There was no return address, but the postmark was from Portland, Oregon, dated just a week earlier. I opened it carefully, my hands shaking slightly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in that same spidery handwriting. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, my name is Daniel Peterson. I'm 79 years old and I've recently learned something about my past that I felt compelled to share with you. Last week, my daughter was doing some genealogy research for our family tree. Through DNA testing and archived adoption records, she discovered that my birth name was Daniel James Morrison, and that I was born in Pennsylvania to a woman named Abigail Thorne. I hired a private investigator to learn more about my birth mother. What he discovered was heartbreaking. A woman who'd loved me enough to give me up, who'd spent her entire life searching for me, who died never knowing what became of me. The investigator also discovered something else. 3 months ago, a man named Daniel Whitmore stayed at my birth mother's house. According to the current owner, my cousin Marcus, though we've never met, you spent time in the attic where my mother lived out her final years. You cleaned it, organized it, made it beautiful again. I don't know why you did this. I don't know if you knew about my mother, about her story, about me, but I wanted to thank you. The investigator showed me photographs of the attic, of how you'd transformed it from a prison into something peaceful. I've lived a good life. I was adopted by wonderful parents who loved me. I became a teacher, married a good woman, raised 3 children of my own. I have grandchildren now and even a great-grandchild. I've been happy, blessed in ways I probably didn't deserve. But I've always felt that empty space you mentioned to my cousin, that sense of something missing, something I couldn't quite name. Learning about my birth mother, about Abigail, has helped me understand what that empty space was. It was her. It was the mother I never knew, the woman who loved me enough to let me go. I'm too old now to make the trip to Pennsylvania. My health isn't what it used to be, but my daughter has promised to visit the house for me, to see where my mother lived, to say a prayer at her grave. And I wanted you to know that your kindness mattered. Whatever led you to that house, whatever made you take the time to clean that attic and honor my mother's memory, it mattered. It helped an old man make peace with a past he never knew he had. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Thank you for seeing my mother not as a madwoman or a ghost, but as a person who loved and lost and suffered and endured. I hope your own empty spaces have grown smaller. I hope you found peace too. With gratitude, Daniel James Peterson. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring my vision. Then I showed it to Sarah, who cried too. It was real, she said. Everything you told me, it was all real. Maybe, I said, or maybe it's just an incredible coincidence. Maybe there's no such thing as ghosts and I just happened to clean an attic that happened to belong to this man's birth mother. Do you really believe that? I thought about that night in the attic, about Abigail's tears and her story and the way she'd faded into light. No, I said finally, I don't. I think she was there, I think she was waiting, and I think somehow, some way I helped her find what she needed. And did she help you find what you needed? I looked at Sarah, beautiful, patient Sarah, who'd stuck with me through all my moods and silences and walls, who loved me despite the empty spaces I carried. Yeah, I said, I think she did. Epilogue 5 years later. It's been 5 years since that weekend at Marcus's house. 5 years since I met Abigail Thorne's ghost in an attic and learned about love and loss and letting go. A lot has changed in that time. Sarah and I got married. We have a daughter now, 3 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes. We named her Evelyn after Marcus's grandmother, though Sarah suggested it first. She said it was a beautiful name, strong and classic. She didn't know the full significance and I didn't tell her. Some secrets can stay secrets. Marcus sold the house 2 years ago. He said he couldn't keep maintaining it, couldn't afford the constant repairs. But I think the real reason was that it held too many memories, too many ghosts, metaphorical ones, now that Abigail was gone. A young couple bought it, excited about fixing it up and starting their life together. Marcus told me they've already renovated most of the first floor and are working on the second. They're happy there. The house feels happy too, like it's finally allowed to just be a house. I still think about Abigail sometimes, about her story, her pain, her decades of waiting, about how love can sustain us or destroy us depending on whether we learn to let it go. I think about Daniel Peterson too. I never wrote back to him, I wouldn't have known what to say, but I kept his letter. I keep it in a box with other important documents, things I want to remember. A year after I received his letter, I saw an obituary in the Portland newspaper. I'd started checking it periodically, just in case. Daniel James Peterson had passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family. He was 80 years old. The obituary mentioned his career as a beloved high school English teacher, his volunteer work with literacy programs, his devotion to his family. It said he was preceded in death by his wife of 52 years and survived by 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. It didn't mention Abigail. How could it? He'd only learned about her months before he died, but I'd like to think that in those final months he'd found some peace, that knowing her story had helped fill that empty space he'd carried all his life. I'd like to think that wherever Abigail's spirit is now, she knows about him, that she knows her son lived a good life, loved and was loved, made a difference in the world, that her sacrifice, giving him up so he could have a better life, wasn't in vain. As for me, I still carry those empty spaces. I probably always will, but I've learned to live with them, to see them not as flaws but as part of what makes me human. And when they feel too large, too overwhelming, I think about Abigail's advice: find people who understand, who accept you as you are, holes and all. Build a life that matters even if it's not perfect. I've done that. Sarah and we've built something beautiful together. It's not perfect. We still fight, still struggle, still have moments when we can't understand each other. But we keep trying. We keep showing up for each other, keep choosing love even when it's hard. And Evelyn, our daughter, she fills spaces in me I didn't even know were empty. When she laughs, when she puts her tiny hand in mine, when she says, "I love you, Daddy," in that sweet, lisping voice, in those moments I feel whole in a way I never did before. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone to Marcus's house that weekend. If I'd said no, if I'd been too busy or too scared or too wrapped up in my own problems. Would Abigail still be there, waiting? Would Daniel Peterson have died never knowing about his birth mother? Would I still be broken, still be pushing Sarah away, still be lost in my own empty spaces? I don't know, I can't know, that's not how life works. But I'm grateful it happened the way it did, grateful for that haunting, terrifying, beautiful weekend. Grateful for Abigail's story and Daniel's letter and all the ways they changed me. Last month, Sarah and I drove past the old house. We didn't plan to. We were in Pennsylvania visiting her parents, and I took a wrong turn that led us down Blackwood Lane. When I realized where we were, I almost kept driving, but Sarah asked me to stop. "I want to see it," she said, "the house that changed everything." So I pulled over and we sat there in the car looking at the old Victorian. It looked better than I remembered: fresh paint, new shutters, the porch repaired. The yard was well maintained and there were flowers blooming in beds along the front walk. "It looks happy," Sarah said. "It does," I agreed. "Do you think she's really gone?" Sarah asked. "Or do you think part of her is still there?" I thought about that. I think she's gone. I think she found what she needed and moved on. But I also think, I paused, trying to find the right words. I think places can hold memories, can hold the echo of the people who lived there, not ghosts exactly, just impressions, reminders of the lives that were lived, the love that was felt, the pain that was endured. "That's beautiful," Sarah said. "Yeah," I said, "it is." We sat there for a few more minutes, watching the house in the afternoon light. Then Evelyn woke up in her car seat and started fussing, and we had to go. As I pulled back onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. For just a moment, I thought I saw something, a figure in white standing in the attic window, watching us drive away. But when I looked again, there was nothing, just an empty window reflecting the sky. If this story touched your heart, show your support by liking this video. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you.